what happened was that it's of course tied up with our colonial experience, and um, after independence, the views that had been put together by British historians about the nature of Indian civilization were the only correct ones. And they were not right, as we know now, that the caste system was created by the British through their census work in 1901 and other censuses. And the British totally impoverished India. India's share of the world economy went down from 25% in 1800 to about 2% in 1914. And then there was a slight bump after the First World War when some manufacturing was allowed in India. So we have lived on with many falsehoods, and it has created a attitude where unpleasant or inconvenient things have been pushed under the rug. And what happened in Kashmir in 1990 and many years prior, we saw, I was shocked yesterday. I was talking to some friends from Maharashtra and very well informed, and they said we had no clue that all this had happened. But this, in many ways, was the policy that the Indian intellectuals and perhaps people in the entertainment world adopted. And perhaps the rationale behind was that, why stir up the pot in the sense of let's not talk about inconvenient things. But I think that's a great error. We must confront facts as they are. Truth is what sets us free. And even talking of rasas in the entertainment world, we know that the Hindi movies have focused on shringar and hasya, entertainment to lull people to sleep, so to speak. But one rasa which has been left out is the Raudra rasa. Uh, Heat and light are two aspects of the same reality. Rudra and Shiva are two aspects of the same reality. You cannot have auspiciousness without confronting facts as they are, confronting reality as it is. And we haven't done that. I think Kashmir Files has been a wake-up thing, or has shook up people, because it's taken us to the facts as they are in their raw form, which is what is needed. And this is something, of course, that came up in so many different ways yesterday as well. So I think in that sense, it's really a path-breaking film, because in India, just to give a historical context to how things have been pushed under the rug, one of the greatest genocides ever in the history of mankind took place in Bangladesh in 1971. And after the Pakistanis surrendered, 93,000 of them, there were 153 officers of the Pakistani army who were identified as war criminals. But what India had to do was to set up an international tribunal, because why do we need this? We need reckoning so that such acts of barbarity are not repeated, because we let them go. So the Pakistani establishment has kept on with the same ways. So we need all of this. We need a reckoning of what happened in Kashmir in the 1980s and thereafter. And this is for the good of everybody, the good not only of the people who have suffered, but also for creating a process which will let the perpetrators of such atrocities free from the clutches of the mentality which has driven them to whatever they have done, whatever atrocities they have done. So I think Kashmir Files is really a historic film because of its boldness, because of its speaking truth to power, and we need more of it. I do hope that there would be other movies and other creative, creations in other intellectual fields, and the writers and scholars and others who would take up um, um, related issues, or issues which are pan-Indic issues. And we must also not forget that in many ways India is truly, although it's sometimes too facile to say India is Vishwaguru, but truly the world is looking up to India. Why? Because just focus on the outer world, on the body, has led the rest of the world to a great sense of despair. In the United States itself, 120,000 people died of drug overdose last year alone. So the world is looking up to yoga. Yoga is really lived Hinduism. We must stand up and recognize for all its power. And I think I trust that the flood that has been unleashed by the flood of emotion and perhaps understanding that's been unleashed by the Kashmir Files will take us to other places, which would be good, not just for Kashmiris, Kashmiri Pundits, Indians, and everybody across the whole world. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Subhash Kak. That was marvelous. I will just make one comment for our listeners. It's the Chinese, not the Indians, who say that what they refer to as Kashmiri yoga that came from Kashmir to China, which tamed barbarian China. So Kashmir sent over 500 acharyas to China. It exceeds the number that the rest of India sent to China. And it was Kashmir yoga that civilized China. So the power of yoga, as Subhash Kak said, living Hinduism should not be underestimated. With that, I'll turn it over to Makaranji to introduce our next speaker.
Thank you. Thank you. I just want to say a word of thanks and gratitude and appreciation to Professor Subhash Kak. We coincided at IIT for a little while before he returned to the United States. I must tell all of you that apart from being a very distinguished engineer and professor of engineering, he's a great scholar. He's a poet in Hindi and English, and he has a tremendous both knowledge and insight into the Vedas. He's written an article on the proof of the existence of God. Okay, please read it. I mean, it's a mathematical, scientific approach to this question. I invite you to look at his vast corpus of work, and he's a very fertile mind, very erudite, and from numismatics to the Vedas, he covers a wide range, combining humanities and sciences. So my gratitude to you, and we would love to hear you more, but our time is limited. We have other speakers also. I hope we get a second round. Now it's my great honor and privilege and pleasure to invite Lieutenant General Ata Hasnain Sahab. He retired from the army about 10 years ago. Maybe it was 2013, 9 years ago, after 40 years of distinguished service. I think he's India's foremost scholar warrior. In fact, he's from my own alma mater. He's my senior from St. Stephen's College. Then he went to London to the Royal Defence College and came back. He served in Kashmir. In fact, he has a deep insight into what happened in Kashmir. He writes for all the leading Indian newspapers. His columns are not only very well researched, but always reasonable and always India positive. He's a great patriot. He's a very noble individual. And he and Sabiha ji, his very distinguished wife, are I think one of the couples I most admire. So with those words, I invite you, sir, to please enlighten us In fact, I must say one more thing. I saw the Kashmir Files sitting next to him, and, for a moment, I was actually concerned, about how he would take it. And then during the interval, he said, Makran, I have seen all this and I have seen worse. And I just then kept quiet because my stomach was churning, I mean, I saw the film 2 times, but anyhow, I'll now turn it over to you, sir. Thank you so much for joining us today. Thank you, sir.
Jai Hind and good evening to everyone. Professor Makran, thank you so much for that introduction. Greatly value it. It's a great idea to have this event because it allows us to speak a little more openly instead of the hushed whispers in which people are seen to be speaking around about this film. I saw this film in your company, and actually, I mean, one can't say one enjoyed the film, but I felt the film. I felt the film very, very strongly. It needs a man like you to drive and ideate. I'm really glad I joined this panel today, a panel of great intellectuals. My Jai Hind to everyone. So I claim that I know this conflict reasonably well. And I'm going to give you a perspective which may be slightly different in the sense that an understanding from a geostrategic, geopolitical angle too. And I think that is what I can bring to this particular panel. I wanted to tackle this under 4 headings, basically. My first impressions and why there is such little information on the theme of this film. Why did all this happen? Why was it allowed to happen? And what can we do now? And I took the trouble of ensuring a little bit of research. I spoke to officers who were in the Military Operations Directorate on the 19th of January, 1990. And I asked them for their impressions. And I will reveal some of the things that they told me to. So mine is a very dispassionate perception from a professional soldier's angle. People have forgotten the 19th of January because it was convenient to make them forget it. No awkward questions, no investigations, no finger pointing. We were at a very confused stage on India's post-independence history in 1990. I will allude to this as we go along. There were too many things happening in 1990. Someone should ask me, where was I on that day? Was I in Kashmir? No, I was not. I was sitting at the other end of the world. I was in Jaffna. I was in Jaffna at this particular time, and I didn't even hear about this for the next 3 months. I came to know about what happened 3 months later. This was a world about Sri Lanka, about Pakistan's borders, about Siachen Glacier, the falling rupee, inflation, no leadership, and the world was all coming apart, with the Cold War having just ended. So no one was reporting with sufficient depth. We really had no idea what was hitting us. It was happening just too fast. So soon after the event, we were seeing a situation where the confidence of the separatists was supreme. They perceived Azadi was at hand. In the prevailing chaos, people were walking to and fro from the LOC. This is hardly known to people, that actually there were people on the line of control who were walking across and said, Kashmir banega Pakistan. That is the kind of messaging which was going on at that particular time. It was actually touch and go for India at that time. India came down very heavily, all guns blazing. A counter-terror and a counter-separatist campaign commenced with kinetic power as the main means. And that was the correct decision. That was the correct thing to do. From then on, it was a question of restoring order, not investigating to see what brought about that disorder. It was inconvenient to start investigating into things to see why this disorder came. Everyone was in a hurry to try and restore that disorder to order. And it has taken us 25 years to restore that order, which is one of the major reasons why all this somehow escaped us. It's not for me to give answers on how many died and how many left the valley, etc. I am no investigator. That it happened is something I wish to authentically confirm. I want to tell you that it happened, because there are many people who think nothing like this happened ever. Even a couple of years later, the telltale signs of the events of 19th January 1990 were available in the moth-eaten derelict houses, all in a state of disrepair. Later, many of the Central Armed Police Forces organizations took over these houses. The saga of the Kashmiri Pundits was relegated to being just uncomfortable questions which no one had answers for. It is worth having a white paper on this entire period, worth having a white paper to see really what happened. One of the greatest weaknesses of our campaign in Jammu and Kashmir has been the lack of knowledge of the immediate past. No historical documents. Our soldiers do not even know where the conflict came from. They just go there, are posted there, they fight, they carry out their task and come away with no knowledge of the historicity of events there. I am one of those who went there repeatedly and kept investigating into this for my own intellectual capabilities. One of the great, people don't just, what you have to remember is that people don't just get up one day and leave their roots to go and live in some shanty camps 300 kilometers away. I mean, it makes no sense. Don't people know that there are 500,000 people sitting away from Kashmir, sitting away from their homes? It is known. But no one has ever cared to look into the depth of it as to why it has happened. They were made to leave through a campaign of fear instilled by atrocities, the very same atrocities which are seen in this film. They were afflicted, these atrocities were afflicted upon the Kashmiri Pundits by a segment of the people. But as always, it is the silent majority which gets tainted for not speaking up. And if they did speak, then not doing so loudly enough. Why did it happen? That's an important thing. I think my intervention is, this is the more important aspect. It wasn't just local reasons or traditional antipathy. It was a brewing situation in which revisionist Islam was breaking its head to the surface. In Pakistan, Zia-ul Haq outlined the Zia doctrine. The Zia doctrine, which is not a public document, believed in some of the following things. Pakistan's inability to wreak retribution against India for the loss of 1971. The necessity to fight India differently, not by the conventional route. To exploit Jammu and Kashmir people's sentiments for secession from India, a mistaken notion which Pakistan always believed in, the people's dimension. They tried it in 1947, they tried it in 1965, and they were wanting to try it once again in 1990. To use ideology to foster greater Islamic connect and sentiment for Pakistan. Zia believed this was his trump card. Zia also believed that the Kashmiri Muslims could be united far more through obscurantist ideology. Linking them to Wahhabist ideology would always obtain the support of the Saudis, the main sponsors of the Wahhabi ideology. A slow and steady campaign to Wahhabize Jammu and Kashmir's Muslim populace was necessary. But the trigger for the conflict initiation, and I always believe this is a very important part of conflict initiation. This would have to be a very big event, something which would leave India floundering and unable to respond to. This was the extermination and the expulsion of the Kashmiri Pundits to achieve a form of ethnic cleansing which would lay the Kashmir Valley open to reception of the obscurantist Islamic ideology and ensure increasing public antipathy against India and its army. Pakistan did succeed in its intent, but could not take it to the end, to the conflict termination stage. The 19th January 1990 events were set up with this particular intent. My interaction with some officers, as I was telling you, who were then serving in the Military Operations Directorate on that particular day, tells me that on 19 January 1990, India was treating, and the army was treating, and the government was treating this like a non-event. So somehow for them, it had no importance. No one accorded importance because all the focus was on the Punjab militancy. Let's see the events which were happening in India at that time. On the Punjab militancy, on the Siachen Glacier 2 years before that, 1987, Pakistan had made huge efforts to try and capture the Siachen Glacier. On Sri Lanka, where 100,000 troops were sitting there, including me, all the focus was here on exercise Zarb-e-Momin, which was taking place on the borders of Punjab at that particular time. One of the biggest exercises Pakistan has ever conducted, and it was supposed to be a response to exercise brass tacks, which we had conducted in 1987. When you see this in synthesis, you realize that how well this was timed, strategically. The attention of the nation, the attention of the government, the attention of the leadership, the attention of the army, everything was somewhere else. If a strategy to handle Jammu and Kashmir and counter Pakistan had ever evolved, we would have taken stock of the genocide. But that strategy somehow never evolved because we were fighting from moment to moment for the last so many years. So why was this allowed to happen? That's the question. Why was it allowed to happen? The all-encompassing reason for India being actually stumped by the course of events was the lack of understanding of the situation in our political, security, and bureaucratic community. That genocidal events could happen as a part of a larger strategy sponsored by an adversary could not perhaps occur to this community of people, including my community of people, the army. Strategic security consciousness was not something India could boast of. We were just emerging from the chaos of Operation Pawan in Sri Lanka, from excise brass tax, and that which had not gone too well. 19 January 1990 for Pakistan was actually a virtually declared conflict initiation event. It was made to be like that. It was against the conventional understanding of war because this was something quite different. The beginning of a hybrid war. I hope you know that this conflict was never a conventional conflict. This conflict was a hybrid conflict. It's easy to comment on it today. At that time in 1990, no one knew what hybrid conflict was. So I would only request you to type my name on YouTube and also along with my name, write down Kashmiri Samaj. And you will come across an 11-minute clip which I spoke about when I spoke at the Kashmiri Samaj in 2019 in Delhi. It will give you some of the major reasons why India was so weak in 1989-90. I do not have the time to perhaps go into this in detail, but the issues I just want to highlight, one or two issues in this. Punjab was burning. Siachen was a priority at that particular time. The forces in the Kashmir Valley at that particular time, today you have how many? 46 battalions of the Rashtra Rifles. You have 70 battalions of the CRPF. You have army, any number of battalions of the army. At that time, there was one single division, the Dagger Division, which I also commanded later, which was there in the valley. It was all deployed on the line of control, and it had 2 additional brigades. Somehow, the importance of this event was never highlighted within the security environment. They all thought this is a one-off event which is happening. And even the intelligence agencies perhaps could not fathom why it was happening. And that's why it was almost ignored. What have we done since then? My last bit, what have we done since then? Efforts to bring back the Kashmiri Pundits have been constantly under threat by terror groups. They continue to be. Through the calendar years, you find Nadi Marg, which is also reflected in this film very well. You've had Wandhama. You had Chitti Singh Pura against the Sikh community in 2000. I was then in Avantipur at that time, controlling operations there. So very few people care to listen to their plight of the Kashmiri Pundits or do much more about the privations that they suffer. In my individual capacity, I can tell you one thing. I have been advising the Kashmiri Samaj and different Kashmiri Pandit organizations for the last 10 years from a strategic angle. And one of the things which I have always told them about is that they will not be able to return to Kashmir in a hurry. The situation in Kashmir will return to normal, but it will not be conducive to the security that we are looking for them. And I am the last one who wants to see encampments with Kashmiri Pandits located in them. What I have advised them is make sure that you retain your roots and you retain your culture. You'll be happy to know at least 2 major yatras, the Kongvatan Yatra and the Gangabal Yatra. 2 yatras were the ones which the Kashmiri Pandits did commence at my behest, and I was the one who made sure that the army supported them completely and continues to support them today. Also, the Sharda Yatra. I'm a member of the Sharda Committee, the Save Sharda Committee. And I can assure you, we are working very hard on this. We are in touch with Muzaffarabad University. The Supreme Court of Pakistan has even passed a direction, a judgment to say that the shrine needs to be restored, and work on that shrine, restoration of the shrine has also happened. There are pujas taking place every year at Tangdhar and at Keren, which are supported by the army. Each year I write to the army to make sure that these yatras and these pujas are supported. This is what is very important, and it must continue, because you cannot afford to allow the Kashmiri Pandit culture to die down. I am very confident that in the near future, with the support of the government probably bringing in greater focus or development, etc., we will be able to stabilize Jammu and Kashmir. But Jammu and Kashmir is just too strategically important with too many eyes of too many adversities all the time on it. This is something that we will have to take care of. I will be ready to answer any questions which are there, but I do want to say at the end that this movie has actually moved my heart tremendously. I only want to leave one message at the end. You know, it's very important to awaken conscience. It's so important to awaken conscience. At the same time, it's very important to send a message for the future. I would have been the happiest if I had seen in the film a message in the beginning and a message at the end. And that message I have drafted. This film is all about a tragic event in post-independence history of India, which needed to be told and remembered. Yet, we as filmmakers also convey that we pray that such an event never again occurs with any community or people in India in the future. Thank you very much, and Jai Hind.
Thank you, sir. Thank you. I can tell you, friends, that in my visits to Kashmir and my very scant understanding of the situation, one thing that I learned is that the army is very respected by all communities. And one reason is because it has had such stellar leadership. And General Hasnain was Corps Commander in Kashmir. He can regale you with hours of stories of how he was also a diplomat, you know, so that the alienation and the anti-India sentiments were held in check when he was there. But he makes us reflect very deeply on the strategic and security deficit in India at the highest echelons, because we always seem to be taken by surprise. Even Kargil, we were taken by surprise. And of course, 89, 90, 91 were very difficult years. Rajiv Gandhi was in power till 89. 90, there was a government led by VP Singh. And then I think Chandrasekhar came to power and we were mortgaging our gold. You know, things were very difficult for India at that time. But the point is that when we look back, this aspect of our national, I think, you know, Bharat Shakti, if I may use that word, really needs to be augmented, the strategic thinking. I was reading a book which has received a lot of attention by the former RAW chief, A.S. Dulat. And you can see the thinking in that book where you're having dinner with the so-called separatists, you're chatting with them, there's a whole place where, you know, all these things are being discussed, debated, deals are being cut, etc., etc. So I think there was something fundamentally flawed in our strategic thinking and approach. And the problem, as General Saab said, is far from over. If you look at the slogans shouted at the Jama Masjid just the day before yesterday, it was orchestrated. There were cell phones and, you know, please see it. And I would also suggest that a book that has come out recently should be compulsory reading, Independent Kashmir, An Incomplete Aspiration by Christopher, you know, I think his name is, if I remember right, Snedden. Now, I go back to what Subhashji said, the decolonization of the Indian mind hasn't happened. And Christopher Snedden is actually the last part of the book. There's a manual of how to win independence. Please read the book. And but the thing that we can learn is to win the hearts and minds of the people also, you see, because they're also our own citizens. So it's a long drawn battle, and any hasty resettlement, and this really brings us to our next speaker, Ms. Pinky Anand, who will talk about the bill, I hope. Any hasty resettlement shouldn't be counterproductive, but some sort of return to the valley, I think, is really, really important, both for symbolic reasons as well as for strategic reasons. And of course, there are Kashmiri families, Pandit families there even today, and their security must be guaranteed. I talked about that yesterday. Now, I want to invite Pinky ji. Let me tell you, she was my senior. She was an LSR, if I remember right. And she was a legend because she was the first woman to be elected as the General Secretary of the Delhi University Students' Union, okay? I mean, that was a long time back, but For some of us, she was an unforgettable figure. She, Arun Jaitley ji, these were the pioneers, you know. I'm talking about the late 70s, early 80s. And then, of course, I left Delhi as well. I went abroad. But she's a legend. She's a great lawyer. After LSR, she went to Harvard, and she's now a member of the BJP. You can see her on TV every now and then. So I can't see you, Pinky ji. Are you there? Will you please unmute, and the floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Makrand. I am there. And ladies and gentlemen, I think I've heard so much, but you know, I have a few things to add, and I will not confine myself to the bill only. I am a lawyer, but I've been brought into this program, and I love history. I don't know enough about it, and so my attempt is to understand history. So I do believe the ultimate truth that emerges from this film and the coverage of it is lessons from the past and lessons for the future. And to that end, I'll add two more factors. I actually have been working with the Trust for the Cultural Heritage of India, and we have in fact made the Partition Museum in Amritsar. So the whole idea being, as socialists, if I may call ourselves that or social activists, as citizens of this country, we want to know what happened. We don't want to brush things under the carpet. Lieutenant General Hasnain quite rightly said that you can't just keep throwing things backwards. And that, in fact, is the attempt. So when Makrand invited me for the film, after we had met up on one of the conclaves in Bombay, I thought it was one of the most exciting experiences to be part of history when we go along, because history is generated as we speak, and we are presently also creating history. The second flagging that I want to do, I think this whole issue coming up at this point possibly also has a relation with the 2019 abrogation of Article 370. I think in our own way, we have woken up to a reality that Kashmir is not something which is separate, something which has to be kept in a kind of pocket and not brought forward. So the abrogation in 2019 August, which I think is one of the most historical events, has fast forwarded this entire movement forward to say, look, this is the tragedies, or this is the series of tragedies that happened in Kashmir. We need to look at it to see how to rectify it and bring back people in the fold. And secondly, to learn what we should not do in future. We can't keep quiet. We can't keep holding things back. Another flagging that I would like to do, Makrand, at this point, even though I know I'll come to the bill very shortly. My first response to the film, I told my husband to come for the film. He said it's a depressing film. I thought about it and I said, look, I remember this, I would equate this to something called Water by Deepa Mehta. When I started the film, I actually wanted to put off the film. I didn't want to see it. It was so horrifying and gruesome. But at the same time, within me, it said, no, I need to know what happened. And I think that is the ultimate film goer, if you like, and somebody who wants to learn from history and go into experiences. Incidentally, my father was a film distributor, a little known feature in my life, but a very important one. So I have been in the film industry one way or the other. So lastly, to come back to the feature of the bill, all these attempts ultimately, and I remember again, Makarand, I've been party to this entire movement sometime almost 30 years back when I went to Belgium and we had gone to the International Court of Justice. In fact, in this entire event of Kashmiri Pundits who were driven away by this exodus and the measure to rehabilitate them. So my connection with this issue is somewhat older than today, goes back a few decades. But today we come into a time where the government has stepped in. The government has provided for rehabilitation packages. As we speak, we did have 2008 when schemes were announced by the government. We do have the Modi government in 2015 announced a second central aid package. There are rehabilitation camps, but we can't do with piecemeal measures only. We need to have a complete code which is available for us so that we can ultimately bring back this highly centric, erudite, professional, and very well managed group of people who form the ancient part of our civilization and who have led the country forward. So the rehabilitation bill that has been recently mooted by one of, in fact, my friends, who was also a colleague at the Campus Law Center, by the way, Mr. Vivek Agnihotri, that is something which has come forward recently and advocates a series of rehabilitation measures, both economically, politically, and socially. And what it does talk about, as somebody said just now, is a white paper, is also some contemplation to bring out the truth of what happened. There's so many versions. History is written by the victors, as they say. So history always keeps varying, but history must be written in the right perspective. And that is what all of us are here for, to ensure that our citizens get their due in society, the lands of the Saraswat and whatever else. In fact, what I enjoyed about the film on the last note, Makaran, so much was the enumeration of the gains that Kashmir has given to India as such. The knowledge base, the intellectual base, the scientific base, I think something which I had not known so well about. So thank you very much for this entire exposure, the exposure to all the people who are here. And Subhash, I will look up your article, which Makarant very kindly brought forward immediately after we finish this session, and read it at some appropriate time. But the bill heralds a very good feature, the measure to recognize the tragedies that have happened and a measure to address them. We may debate about the bill, we must. We must always debate about what must be done. And the important part, lastly, is on the bill, the internally displaced persons. We don't want to make them only as refugees. The point is they have been displaced within their own country. And I think that is a very important feature of the bill, which we need to look at for ourselves. Thank you very much, everybody. And we look forward to being together in various situations at all times.
Thank you, Pinky ji. Thank you so much. I think the bill is outstanding. It's available in the public domain. It is very, I think, far-reaching if you read through its contents, because not only does it call for an acknowledgement of the genocide, but it calls for, I think, a slew of measures for the rehabilitation of the Pundits, restoration of their status, and also many economic, educational, and other measures to support them. So I hope it's debated in the parliament. It's because that's what will bring more attention to its contents. And I hope it will be a bipartisan bill, because the Congress has tabled it. I happened to talk to a very eminent parliamentarian, Dr. Shashi Tharoor. He said he would support the bill. He's a 3 times member of the Lok Sabha, elected from Thiruvananthapuram. So I hope that there'll be multi-party support for this bill. And as you rightly said, Pinky ji, in all the international fora, and I think Pandit Satish Sharma ji said this yesterday, human rights fora, the courts of justice, I think it should be brought to everybody's attention. We are waiting for Kaveri ji. I don't know if she's joining us. She had an emergency yesterday. I don't think I see her anywhere. And if that is the case, I'll turn it over to you, Rakesh ji, to see if you want to allow a few questions. I think Lakshmi ji has raised her hands. Professor Lakshmi, Badlamudi, and some others may have sent in some comments. So Rakesh ji, would you like to take a few questions?
Yes.
And yeah, okay.
I will do that. I just want to add my deep appreciation, Pinky ji, for recognizing that Kashmiri Pundits are IDP. I also am deeply appreciative that you resonated with what Kashmiri Pundits have contributed to Indic civilization. And I have made the statement in the public fora that Kashmir Valley was to the first millennium what Silicon Valley is to the second millennium. The only difference being that the truths of Silicon Valley become obsolete the moment they are discovered, whereas the truths of Kashmir Valley stay eternal and true forever. And so it is imperative that when we talk about Kashmir being the crown of India, that it not be seen as a geography or a history, but it be seen as the cradle of civilization, a term not devised by Indians, but by 19th century Europe. So with that, I'm going to now invite some questions. We can, I'll start with Professor Lakshmi Bandlamudi. I'll unmute you. And those of you who want to ask questions, please raise your hands and we'll give you a turn one at a time. Go ahead, Lakshmi.
Thank you so much, General Ji. It's an honor to ask you this question, and I just need to put this in a framework. My academic work is based on dialogue, and I had given a long webinar in Kashmir. I was invited, and there were more than 300 to 400 students in that situation. So the question is, what is it that can promote the dialogue and what can inhibit dialogue? Because there was a moment in my lecture, this was about 300 to 400 students right from the Kashmir Valley who participated in that, and it was a huge hit, and it's there on what do you call YouTube. But on one hand, that lecture unexpectedly gave me immense hope. There was a moment in that lecture when I said, a land that has been tormented by falsehood and violence can also become a fertile ground for transformation and new ideas. So this was based upon a Russian thinker, and I was speaking very obliquely to the students, and the receptivity was incredibly encouraging to me. I've had more crazy questions from other parts of India than what I ever had in Kashmir. So, sir, my question is, what is it that, because long before this dialogue became fashionable in the Western world, the birthplace of this is really Kashmir. So I was talking about language and laughter and many things, and very freely spoke about Abhinav Gupta and Bhartrhari and Samaya Matrika, Kshemendra and all that, and it was received incredibly well. But the same people who became my friends, close to 400 students on social media, have not said a word when I've written a couple of reviews of the movie. So I don't know whether to feel encouraged. So what gives you the hope, sir, and what gives you caution? That's my question to you. Thank you.
Is that question to me, ma'am?
Yes.
Okay, yeah, I heard it. I heard it with deep intent. I heard it with focus. Thank you, ma'am. Thank you very much. And that's a brilliant question. Absolutely. Communication is the most important thing to find peace in Kashmir, or find peace in any conflict zone in the world. You have to speak to people. If you don't speak, you are going to keep away. You are going to create schisms between you, and obviously there's no chance of peace coming about. We have not been very communicative. I would say we have not been very communicative. We are not comfortable with communication in Kashmir. I as an army man, I always believed that in today's world, one of the very important aspects is to talk through history, talk through culture. If you do not understand the culture of a zone, of an area, you really do not know how to get into conversation with people. This is a very unfortunate thing that has happened there. And the problem in finding peace in Kashmir and creating that stable environment by which we can hope to bring the Kashmiri Pundits back with no threats to them, the whole intent should be how to ensure that everyone who is there in Kashmir, who is a stakeholder for peace, actually contributes to it. The unfortunate thing is that in the last 30 years, we have left it to the armed forces, or rather to the army, to make that communication. We have done it. I can assure you I've communicated a hell of a lot with students, exactly the way you have, with 400 students in the Chinar auditorium of Badami Bagh. But at the end of it, somehow it doesn't gel somehow. There is always an element of a better communication coming across from the line of control, That aspect of jihadism, that aspect of Islamic unity and things like that. And this creates huge confusion in the minds of young people there. You'll be happy to know that today things are changing, rapidly changing, and I'm very certain, I'm very confident that this process will continue. Today, after a long time, you're finding symbols, Indian symbols in acceptable form. You find the Indian flag at Hari Parbat. You find the Tiranga at Gulmarg in the highest flagpole which you can find anywhere in India, perhaps. You are finding the Indian Army band playing at Lal Chowk. This is the kind of environment which is taking place there today. But when you speak to Kashmiris, you have to speak with, there has to be a methodology of speaking. I've learned this over a period of time. I realized that you have to, first of all, put the Kashmiri on the pedestal. You got to be a better listener first than a speaker, right? I was always a listener. I said, you speak for 3 hours, but give me 15 minutes thereafter. And you'll be surprised. I actually told Kashmiri students, abuse India, abuse me, abuse the army. If it helps you to take out the venom from you inside you, do it. Right? I will thereafter speak to you and I will place the bomb. You'll be surprised, many of them, when they came out to have a cup of tea with me, would ask me for a selfie, would take my autograph. And lastly, they would even whisper in my ear to ask, how can we join the Indian Army? And I would say, you have just abused the Indian Army. Why do you want to join it? And that is the time when the real revelation is to come out. They said, well, that is for public, consumption. Actually, in heart of hearts, we love Indian Army. We love the India. Now, you see, the Kashmiri lives in 2 worlds, right? There's a world, 2 worlds apart. It's very difficult to try and bring them to these worlds together and make them understand. That is happening in a way today because there are more people joining the conversation. It was left far too much to the army to join the conversation in the beginning. Today, academics who make the difference. Professor Anand, you make the difference. People like you make the difference. You are the people who need to go and speak to them. People who have a cultural understanding, an understanding of history, who can answer and respond correctly. Otherwise, people who have no knowledge of history and culture will give all the wrong responses. And you'll find all kinds of awkward kind of situations emerging out of it. So I go by your this thing, man, Professor Lakshmi, that it's conversations is the most important aspect, but it has to be informed conversation and understanding based upon what the sentiments of the people there are. If that is correct, there is no end to the conversation we can have and achieve so much out of it. Thank you.
Thank you, General Saab. Before we go to other raised hands, there's a question in the chat box which is directed at you. And the question is that why are books such as Raiders of Kashmir, written by Major General Akbar Khan, not read and discussed and taught in India? I mean, those of you who know the book, this man led some of the, if I remember it right, the tribesmen who invaded Kashmir, and he was jailed by Pakistan. I mean, these stories are so complex. And the one thing that I got from what General Saab said is that, trauma creates schizophrenia of sorts. So even in the Muslim Kashmiris, there's a deep schizophrenia. One part of them says one thing, another part says something, and they are also in need of healing. It's not just that we can turn everybody into a villain, regardless of their complicity, which the film shows. But anyhow, so we leave that psychological part out, but dialogue, conversation is absolutely important. And as you said, knowledge, and not just ideology, because ideology may be good, but it doesn't convince people deeply. It is knowledge and facts and deep understanding of history and circumstances that helps. Anyhow, but sir, can you answer this question about why we are not reading these books so that we understand our adversary better?
Thank you, sir, for that. First of all, let me say very clearly, there is a dearth of literature as far as Jammu and Kashmir is concerned. Post-independence Jammu and Kashmir is concerned. You will find most of the literature is based upon war fighting, conflict situations, etc. You'll find about Operation Gibraltar, you'll find about Operation Gulmarg, you'll find a lot of things post-1989, etc. But the social, now I want to particularly convey this. This problem in Jammu and Kashmir is not a military problem. We have stepped into it from the military side to take control and to stabilize. You have to see this conflict from a political, a social, an economic, a psychological, a diplomatic. From all these domains, you got to see it. We are unfortunately, most of the time, we have been addressing it from the military side because we felt it's a problem of the military, right? Now, because of that, not enough has been written on this. A book like Akbar Khan's Raiders of Kashmir, yes, it's an excellent book. No doubt, I've read it many times. I've got a copy of it lying with me somewhere here. Besides that, there are other books like General Eriksson's very famous book, Splendor Was the Thread, which will give you a fantastic exposure to the operations of 1947-48, and some great events like the heroism of a person like Maqbool Sharwani, which is hardly known to anyone. That there was a Kashmiri Muslim like Maqbool Sharwani. For him, we constructed a memorial. I have constructed it myself at Baramulla, hardly known. So I fully agree with you that there is even if the little bit of literature which is available, people prefer today to listen to television and listen to YouTube, but would rather not pick up a book to read it, because that is the actual absorption of knowledge. That is something which is unfortunate, which is not happening today. But at the same time, I would say that there is a dearth of literature, and more we write, the more we analyze, the better it will be.
Thank you. I think the questioner also meant that we need to have a deeper understanding of the security establishment in Pakistan and how they are thinking about Kashmir right from their inception, because otherwise we are constantly going to be surprised and be on the back foot. I'll turn it over back to Rakesh. My request to the questioners is to frame their question within 30 seconds, and don't mind my saying so that we can hear more voices. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, General. I thought I saw Professor Subhash Kak raise his hand. Professor Kak, did you have an additional comment on that question that was raised?
Yes, a very small point which adds on to what General Hasnain and Makaram have already mentioned, which is how do you heal, or how do you speak across, two groups. I think what has happened in Kashmir, and as somebody who grew up there, went to college, etc., there was a lot of deceit even in conversations. This is something that was adopted, that you are operating at many different levels, that you are saying something across, but you really mean something else. I think the best way to deal with such a mode of behavior, if you will, is to speak as honestly as one can. And I think that's where Akbar Ahmed's book also comes in. I think when you speak to the adversary with honesty, I think that's when bridges build up, because after all, we're all humans. Everybody wants truth and knowledge and prosperity. And it's only when people are afraid that they do things which, and they may do these things furtively. They may be listening to this and doing something else. But if you speak honestly, I think that should be our fundamental, bedrock, that we will, and this is what I've done. I've spoken to, UCLA had a major conference a few years ago, and they had brought in generals from Pakistan and many other people, and I was there as well. And I realized that, even the Pakistani generals in their clipped Oxford accents, they were saying one thing on the one side, and when you chatted with them, then they were talking about something else. There's something for public consumption, and there's something for private, here we are all friends, we are all Hindustani or Pakistani, we are all brothers. So now I can tell you what it really is. But I think we should totally emphasize honesty. And I think that's where is the great contribution of Kashmir Files. I think even talking of Kashmir in the media from Bollywood, it's all been papering over and talk about, laughter and love and all that. And those also have their place, but let's not exclude other things. It's only when we build bridges that we'll be able to move forward.
I just want to make a very small comment here. When I was a graduate student, my interest in Kashmir started because my guru was Professor Girdhari Lal Tikku, who is from a very eminent family in Srinagar, and also Professor Braj Kachru. So these were my teachers at Illinois. And the thing that Professor Tikku told me is that, now again, you can correct me, but truth telling and truth speaking was not possible. You had to, for some time at least, to survive. There were strategies of survival in which you could not say things the way that they were. And I think that many subtle communicative strategies and survival strategies were a part of the history of the Kashmiri Pandit community. So this is something, but now I think the time for truth telling has come. I think that things have exploded in such a way, and Article 370, there are many things that have happened where it's now possible. And of course, sadly, truth telling is possible because most of the Pandits have left the valley. You know, they don't have to worry about being targeted tomorrow morning by the shopkeeper or even their neighbor for speaking out a certain reality, because now they are not under threat in quite the same way, you know. So this is a very complex, and it goes back to colonialism. Indians survived by this dual strategy. You know, I remember a poem by Ramanujan where he says that his father was a teacher. He had two lives, you know. He was one person, you know, upstairs when he did his puja. He wore a certain dress, then he changed, he put on a jacket, he came downstairs. You know, he was then a government person, you know. So this, again, this schizophrenia of the colonized, of the traumatized, and survival strategies, you know. I think if you read even Tagore, Ghore Baire, the inner and outer, etc., etc. But I think we are fortunate to be in a time when we can try and start telling our truths, honestly. And even now, the battle is not over. We are still being cancelled. I have been cancelled. Many of us have been cancelled. I have been cancelled in my own university in JNU, okay? But we have to continue. We have to continue. Over to you, Rakeshji. There are other hands.
Yeah. I'm going to now, that was a great question, great discussion from the panelists. And I'll now ask Raja Sheth to ask his question. Please make it short, Raja. Just go ahead and ask the question.
We were talking about the socio-cultural aspects of Kashmir. I wonder what the socio-political angle on this is, especially there is, you know, Pakistani occupied Kashmir, and there is Gilgit-Pak in the Baltistan area. There are people who have lived there for thousands of years, and they do, you know, quote their Buddhist heritage for several thousands of years. How do we see us communicating with those folks as well and bridging the gap across the boundaries?
Very good question. I'll ask Pinky to take a stab at it, and because it's political, it involves Pakistan, and I'll ask Lieutenant General Ata Hasnain then to follow, because he's mentioned the overtures with Sharda Peeth. So Pinky, why don't you go first?
Yeah, I think the way Kashmir has been identified into various pockets has been one of the historical reasons for the entire aberrations, if one might call it that. And the fact that...
Pinky, can you speak up? Can you speak loudly, please? Yeah, thank you.
I said, well, I think the manner in which Kashmir has remained separate from India has been one of the principal reasons for the entire problems that have happened. Not entire, but definitely a majority of that, possibly much more than the majority also. So this entire identification of the various pockets that have remained within Kashmir and the current situation of the abrogation of Article 370, I think will take the way forward, because ultimately now there is no question about any separate status for Kashmir. And I think that changes the entire bandwidth of the discussion politically as well as socially and culturally. So now, being part of India, everything amalgamates into one. The entire aspirations of any outsiders, terrorists, other groups, other countries, I think can go for another direction altogether. And we are now back to the integrated policy where we can actually focus on that.
May I also just comment on this?
Yes, you're next.
Very, very, very briefly. Mine is a realist point of view. I'm sorry. I understand that there is still in what is called a no war, no peace situation in Jammu and Kashmir. The government has done well that on the 1st of October 2019, they published a map. You may remember that blue and gold map, The blue map shows the whole of Gilgit-Baltistan, Aksai Chin, and Ladakh as part of one Ladakh Union Territory, and the whole of Jammu and Kashmir and Pakistan-occupied Kashmir as one entity. Very good. This is the start point. But I would say the realist angle to it is that boundaries still continue to exist. The line of control is still very much there, right? Gilgit-Baltistan continues to exist as much as Pakistan-occupied Kashmir. Conversations are not taking place across the borders, let me tell you. Nowhere. They are not taking place. Abroad, yes, internationally, in different institutions, in the United States, in the UK, etc., people are meeting, people are talking to each other. In fact, relations between people from across different parts of Jammu and Kashmir are very, very conducive between themselves in all these countries. Unfortunately, nothing official, nothing. I still feel we are 3 years from the decision of 5th of August, 2019. We were perhaps expecting too much. We've gone through 2 years of the pandemic in the middle. These are long-term things, and it will happen over a period of time. I would say if the situation in Jammu and Kashmir remains stable without a trigger coming back and bringing all the issues back again, in the next 4 or 5 years, relative stability, relative peace, no warlike situation and terrorist activities to the minimum, perhaps a restoration of conversations can start and will take place.
Thank you. I'll ask Pandit Satish Sharma to unmute himself. You have a question, and please go ahead.
Pranamji, namaskar, and on today, an auspicious day, Jai Shri Ram to everyone. And picking up the theme of Professor Paranjapiji, Om Rudraya Namaha, we could all do with a bit more of that Shakti, couldn't we? I just want to piece together 3 very specific points that have been raised today, which I've learned. Firstly, on the comments that Srimati Anandji was making, we're seeking to establish that this was a genocide. In a genocide, there is a victim and there is a perpetrator. Have we clearly named the perpetrator? On the basis of what Hasnainji was saying, it would seem to me that there is sufficient evidence to establish that the Pakistani state, in an act of war, was the initiator and the perpetrator, in which case these are war crimes. This genocide is a war crime as well as a genocide. But in order to be able to do that and to say it as clearly as that, there is evidence required. I mean, here in the United Kingdom, Pakistani paid members of parliament who have received funds directly from the state of Pakistan have raised in parliament on 405 occasions the issue of Kashmir. Only on one occasion has the issue of Kashmir been discussed from a pro-India point of view. All of the other occasions have been from an anti-India point of view. So there is a disinformation campaign sponsored by the state of Pakistan as well. So do we have yet the clarity to be able to present an irrefutable position that Pakistan in an act of war committed war crimes, which we are now saying are a genocide? I think that would be a wonderful and clear statement to be able to make. Are we there yet? Thank you.
No, I think that's so important. I don't believe the war crimes of Pakistan and Bangladesh have been, recorded, where they're on a scale that's unimaginable. The documentation is, irrefutable. There is all kinds of evidence, and yet. So I think I talked earlier about the strategic deficit in the Indian establishment, and this extends to the PR. What you say about UK is true of the US. There are lobbyists paid by Pakistan. Millions of dollars are paid. They sit in Washington, DC. They hook up with senators and influencers on Capitol Hill and congressmen, and the anti-India lobbies are very well oiled and lubricated, whereas I don't think Indians have got, we are harnessing the diaspora, all free, all of you are free workers, you see, for Bharat Mata. But we need the state and other entities to invest in professionals, professional lobbyists. So your point is so well taken. Thank you, Pandit.
And I presented this point with regard to supporting the disinformation campaign and challenging it to the High Commission 3 years ago. I have a meeting on Wednesday with the current High Commissioner. We present the proposal that, look, at least work with us. We're doing the work for you. We have the language, we have the networks, we have the reach, and we're wanting to work with you. But I do appreciate and wholeheartedly agree with your sentiment that it's on occasion, like speaking.
Our diplomats, our IFS is a very fine service, but it is so understaffed. We need to double the number of officers we have. Singapore has more officers than India. I mean, we are 1.4 billion people. Anyhow.
So my question is,
before we go on, can we ask Pinky Ji to respond to that?
Yes, thank you very much.
Two things. I think what has been raised as this entire disinformation or misinformation campaign which happens is actually very prevalent. I think we need to actually step up. I don't think the numbers are the issue. I think somewhere down the line, it may be an internal issue, but at the same time, for the internal issue to manifest itself into some finality, it will not happen unless we go into possibly a warlike situation, which is not in the contemplation. So in the meantime, definitely the international community and the fact of our own diaspora being actively available, we do need to take this forward. We actually live in a situation where we don't activate our professionals, including the foreign service people and the IFS cadre, which understaffed or otherwise, believe me, when they want to go with the subject, they go for it in fullness. So definitely we should take this forward as a new homecoming for the issues which are concerning us tremendously.
Thank you, Pinky Ji. I do want to add one more postscript. Pandit Sharma Ji, you be pleased to know that Global Kashmiri Pandit Diaspora, which is a sponsor of this symposium and also was a sponsor, well, you know, contributed to the logistics, intellectual support of the Kashmir Files, that for the last 3 years, we have been meticulously documenting what I hope will be the basis of a legal filing against Pakistan for war crimes and genocide at the United Nations. And also for some of your viewers, you may find it interesting that in the United States, there is only one law whose jurisdiction is not limited to the sovereign dominions of the United States, but is global. And that is any crime that is committed that is of a human rights nature. So we have meticulously documented everything from the community point of view. However, what is missing is the intelligence that Bharat Mata has of the connection between these crimes and Pakistani agencies. We have individual data, like for example, as I was mentioning to General Ata Hasnain, my great-grandfather was the first Kashmiri Pandit who was killed by the Pakistani tribals in 1947 when they came into Kashmir. I have a database of 1,646 Kashmiri Pandits by name, by how they were tortured, by how they were killed, location. But connecting it to the terrorists who were agents of Pakistan, that is the responsibility of the state. And as Pinky Ji has said, may the goddess hear her words. We have asked the state to step up. We have said, we will go, but give us that missing link of evidence. Our lawyers are great. We were the ones who single-handedly, this small community, took Pakistan's much wanted lobby and put Ghulam Nabi Fai behind jail. So we are not afraid. Kashmiri Pandits are not afraid to use non-violent ways of getting justice. We will win. So I want you to know that, Pandit Satish Sharma, when you walk in and have your meeting in London, you should feel empowered. We will not spare Pakistan for this crime. Be assured of that. Let's move to the next.
At the same time, the Indian state should step up. And it's not enough. See, it's not enough to leverage your own diaspora. You have to hire lobbyists. You have to be professional about this. The stakes are so high. There's a digital war going on. I mean, Hasnain Sahab talked about the hybrid war. The new frontier is a digital war. And again, we are quite behind, I'm afraid. Anyhow, we shouldn't be sidetracked. And over to you.
May I step in for 30
Yes,
seconds?
please.
This is a subject which I have followed for very long, the whole subject of communication strategy. Through two anecdotes, let me tell you how right you are, Pandit Satish Sharma ji, how right you are. I went to Israel for the Global Counter-Terrorist Summit. And I was there, I was absolutely confident there cannot be a Pakistani present in Israel because they don't have a diplomatic relationship. And no one will be here to speak on this subject of Kashmir. I was speaking on Kashmir. You would be surprised at the breakfast table that morning, 3 Pakistanis joined me there. They have got their fingers and hands in every pie. I went to Iran, and at the Indian embassy, the ambassador very kindly told me, "Sir, detach yourself from the delegation. We want you to face the Iranian media." I said, "Great. And what do you want me to speak on?" He said, "Jammu and Kashmir." I said, "Great." I spent 2 days doing this. You will be surprised to know every question which came to me from the Iranian media was as if it had been drafted by the ISI. Right? So Pakistan is a past master at the Inter-Services Public Relations is a very professional organization. The earlier we set up a communication strategy organization in India, the better it will be.
I want to step in here for just 1 second. I couldn't agree more. And now that you mentioned Israel, you see the Pakistani elite, like Israel, they're fighting for their life. We are very relaxed. You know, their game is so much better than ours. They know that they'll be completely wiped out. So every place you'll see them. They've already been there before you. They've done their homework. And we can't underestimate them, you know. Here we laugh, you know, in Delhi drawing rooms, we say failed state, ye, wo. Anyhow, we won't get sidetracked, but the thing is we have to up our game. I couldn't agree more with you, sir. We can't underestimate an adversary. They are fighting with their backs to the wall. They're fighting for their very survival.
So but I just want to add, Magranji and Rakeshji, I'm with you. If we can, whatever we can do it, the level aside from upping up the game, we're happy to do whatever I can.
Oh, that's wow. If there's one thing to come out of those 2 days, that is spectacular. And we'll take you up on that. But very humbly, you know, I would submit one other thing. About
Rakeshji, please speak up. You're fading away. Please speak up.
Yeah, I would submit just one other thing in this category of the state stepping up. See, if you go to Kashmir today, now you have youngsters in Kashmir who are 30 years old, 35 years old, even 40 years old, who have no idea who a Kashmiri Pandit. You know, the state could work with us and make sure that in every school, every student has a very simple chapter on who the Kashmiri Pandits, the indigenous people of Kashmir. It's become that basic. Yes. They should know that a Kashmiri Pandit was who first gave sanctuary to their ancestors. They should know that what Kashmiri Pandits were about serving Kashmiri Muslims. When the genocide of Kashmiri Pandits happened in January 1990, who did they drive out? They drove out 11,000 teachers. Who were they teaching? They were educating Kashmiri Muslims. Who did they drive out? They drove out Kashmiri Pandit doctors. Who were they healing? They were healing Kashmiri Muslims. And where are these Kashmiri Pandits today? They're all over the world, acting as teachers, as doctors, serving humanity. And you know what? The world recognizes Kashmiri Pundits. And we were there serving Kashmiri Muslims. This education, this consciousness has to be birthed inside Kashmir, because that is the only antidote. Every human being understands, hey, if you are taking care of me, you are a good human being. I don't care what Pakistan is saying. Kashmir has Kashmiri Pundits never cared about your accident of birth, never cared about whether you're born Muslim, whether you're born Buddhist, whether you are born Hindu. In our 5,000-year history, we have never cared about that. But Kashmiri Pundits were very concerned about your birth. They were concerned about that one birthright, which is that you have the potential to become Hindu. And that is what Kashmiri Pandit culture is dedicated. That is what we want to do in Kashmir. We want every Kashmiri to fulfill that birthright. But let me stop. I think Vivek Agnihotri ji has joined us. I want to see where you are, Vivek Agnihotri ji. Are you there, Vivek ji?
He said he's joining in just 1 minute. Yeah.
Okay.
Hello. No, I'm here. Thank you very much.
All right, Vivek ji. I just want to summarize for you. We've all been waiting for you. We've had our distinguished speakers, Lt Gen Ata Hasnain. We have Dr. Pinky Anand. We have Padma Shri Professor Subhash Kak. We've had a very stimulating discussion over the last 2 days. And obviously, you've been all over the world. Today, we are just focusing on India's moment of reckoning arising from this movie, The Kashmir Files, which you and Pallavi Joshi ji created, crafted. I'm curious, we all want to know from you, what are your thoughts? What do you think this movie means to India? What are some of the things it confronts India with that you think are important?
Thank you, Rakesh ji. Thank you, Makran ji, for inviting me. Left General Sahab, Subhash ji, I admire him very much. Pinky ji, Lakshmi ji, whoever I can see, all the distinguished guests here. Actually, I am right now, first let me share the feeling. It's full of gratitude. It's gratitude because so many people have worked so hard. And I always say giving credit to me for anything would be like a very big sin. This success of this film is success of all those volunteers, activists, thinkers, writers, who kept this flame alive. You know, like in marketing, we say you can market an idea only if there's a latent demand. And this latent demand, this latent narrative was kept alive. So it's a big victory and success for them that they are being now heard. It's being recognized. People are acknowledging the genocide. And it's opened up so many conversations. This is something which really, really baffles me. That which means there were so many conversations going around in drawing rooms and in offices and canteens and coffee shops, but they were never part of the mainstream. Now they've become part of the mainstream, not just of India, but I think all the international media, because in the last 7 days, I have received calls from every who's who of international media. And the first question they ask me about is Islamophobia. Fine, I say fine, since you do not understand, you want to create a narrative, but fine, at least you are discussing. The question is that, did you show this genocide because you wanted to polarize or there is Islamophobia? So one thing is good, they are at least using the word genocide. They are saying, their complaint is, why have you shown this genocide? Everything was going so fine. There was a lot of happy secularism was happening. And suddenly you came and you disrupted the whole thing. So you have no right to do that. And that's their complaint, basically. Not even one person from any side, political, religious, academic, psychologists, authors, thinkers, influencers, not even one person, not even the common people. Not even one person has been able to point out that which part of the film is not correct. Not even one. And the best part of it is that very often the people who love their country, who love their traditions, societies, who take a lot of pride in their heritage and history, and so generally they are labeled as non-creative or non-intellectuals. I am so glad. It gives me immense sense of satisfaction and pride to see so much of genocide art was created around this film. And so much of discussion on the art of this film. And my great friend, who I really, really respect a lot, Makranji, has done great service by writing about nuances, which even I didn't know. Consciously, maybe subconsciously I knew, but thanks a lot for that. Okay, now what it means, this film, the success. If this film is not just a film anymore, it's not about the numbers, it's not about what it's doing commercially, but more importantly, it's become a mass movement at 2-3 levels. Level number 1, we have understood the value of, see, as in marketing, they say A, B, C, D centers. A is all metros, and then B is mini metros, C are smaller towns, you know, and then the D are like, who cares? They are just statistics. They exist only for elections. Even marketers don't reach them. We have become such a city-centric society that we have forgotten about these people and their desires and their voice. And I want to tell the entire Kashmiri Pandit community, anybody who's listening to this, you should be very happy to know that the biggest support to your cause has come from people who we call illiterate, lower class, poor people. Pan wale, they have been giving free pan to people who showed tickets. I was in Kanpur recently, and the Iron Man, jo kaplo pe istri karta hai, he was doing free ironing of one set of clothes for if you show a ticket. And rickshaw walas were giving free rides for this thing. Even pani puri walas were not far behind. Some few Jyotishis also started this, you know, reading your Kundli free if you show them a ticket. I am a people's man. I'm always amongst people. And I kept asking these people, why are you doing it? And they said, because this is the truth of our people. And the world must know the truth of our people. And the second response was, they said, when they heard the speech in the end of that boy, the protagonist, they said, we never felt so proud of our rich culture and heritage. We always thought Kashmir is like, you know, something else. It's part of India, but it's not really us. So there was this feeling of otherness with Kashmir. Yes, it's a problem of Kashmiri Pundits, but it's not our problem. It's their problem. We are just supporting them. Now, suddenly, after seeing the references of Sharda, Saraswati, and Shiv, and Kalidas, and Natishas, and all these things, they understood, Marthan Temple, they understood that ultimately, who are we? What is this society? What is, after all, when we say our society, our people, our nation, what is it? It is the connection with culture. We are connected through food, we are through music, through art, literature, stories, concepts, ideas. And this great diversity unites us. It makes us feel, yes, we are good, but somebody else also has something good. And how we take advantage of this goodness with each other, that's what makes a great society and culture. But this togetherness, somewhere we cut it off since partition, definitely, I know. People realize the importance of being connected, standing with each other, and being united. This film has shown how the youth of this country has got united. Just to give you a very statistical examples. In Kerala, Hindi movies hardly release. Only very big one, huge, really huge films release, but very limited. I forced to release it in Kerala. It started with one show, and within few days, it became almost 120 shows. Kerala, and still running. Tamil Nadu, exactly the same thing.
Wow.
Bengal, it's been the top grosser in Bengal. Hindi films of this size don't release in Bengal. So what I'm saying, this support is coming from unexpected quarters. The lower class. So this gives me, so I'll just crystallize it to point number one, what it means to India. It means to India that Bharat is alive. The only problem is the Bharat. See, there is a divide, Bharat and India. India is doing all the discourses. Bharat is not doing discourses. The moment they got to know about this, in the film, there's a line of Anupam Kher. He says, "हमारा सच जाके पूरे भारत में बताओगे ना, क्योंकि जिस दिन भारत को हमारा सच पता चल गया, देखना कैसे पूरा भारत हमारे साथ खड़ा हो जाएगा." It didn't happen for 32 years, but now, when the Bharat got to know about the truth, see how they are standing with all the Kashmiri brothers and sisters. This is what this film means. Point number one. Point number two, that for the first time in a long time, I don't know, since I have been born, during the World War, CIA spent billions of dollars to convince Hollywood studios and producers to work or act as soft power in the moment of national crisis. And they did, but they never stopped. It was a time-bound project, but they never stopped. Till date, if you see wherever you go in the world, even a child sitting in Nairobi or Kenya, who doesn't go to school, 7-year-old kid, without clothes, who's sitting there like a skeleton, you ask him which is the greatest country in the world, he'll say America. He doesn't know politics, he doesn't read newspapers, he has no access to information, but he has seen Hollywood movies. So very cleverly, America has used Hollywood movies as soft power. In India, we failed to do that. We just did very superficial stories, and we never ever brought into limelight, to global light, about what India actually means. And I always say, not as a joke, but very seriously, when you go to a foreign country and you want to know about their problems, their aspirations, their culture, their architecture, their food, you watch 4 or 5 movies, you'll get to know what this country is like. But in case of India, if you watch most of the mainstream movies in last 10, 15 years, post-liberalization, those movies generally, you learn more about New York and London than you learn about India. Because they also started importing a culture into Indian movies, and where it's so far away from the reality. So far away from the reality. The Student of the Year does not represent Indian youth at all. You are creating fake characters and fake stories and relationships. And actually somewhere, I'm not saying every movie has to be about it, but what I'm saying is the general thread in Bollywood movies has been a lot of fakeness, artificiality, and what they call escapism. But escapism also, if you see, has to basically emerge from reality. You show reality and then you escape from that reality. Superman, the real character, is very real, like anybody else, like any middle-class American. And then the ordinary man does extraordinary things. So if you have to travel to Rwanda, even before going to Rwanda or Googling, if you see a 2-hour movie, and you will know about what's the problem with Rwanda, what is Rwandan genocide. How do we know about Holocaust? Through Hollywood movies. Nobody has gone and read those books of World War II. Nobody does that. Nobody has read about Holocaust. People have seen an Holocaust. Therefore, it was very important when I had met Dr. Surinder Kaul and then later Dr. Rakesh ji. That's the first thing I told them. I said, the problem with this story is, this genocide, is that there is no visual imagery of this. We need to create a very honest visual imagery. And that's why I need to talk to people. I hear it and see it from their point of view and try to find the most common denominator story and present it. In fact, the last speech which you have heard in the film, a lot of contribution has come from Rakesh Kaul ji, sitting at his house. And most of it, in fact, a lot of ideas, I had shot a lot of ideas which he said, but then I had to edit them out, and which when I release the extended version and deleted scenes, you'll be glad to know the way he has spoken about the economics of the genocide. It's a chapter by itself. Somebody needs to write a book on that. I had to take it out because it was a very emotional moment in the end, and I didn't want people to think about numbers and this thing. So anyway, so now this film, if I'm taking extra time, please warn me, somebody, just because I want to share. This is the first time I'm talking about these things, you know.
Speak freely. We have ample time. Speak freely.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. So, yeah. So what we did was GKPD, Global Kashmiri Pandit Diaspora, they formed a union of diversity, a diverse organization. 36 different organizations came together to help screen this film in USA. And they were ranging from World Sikh Organization to Jews Organization to American Physicians Association to Maratha Mandal and Telangana, all kinds of everything, all 36. The thought behind that was, what if we can use this film for diplomacy as soft power of India and impress upon the world that it was not an exodus. Exodus can also take place if there is a flood. This was not an exodus. This was a bloody genocide. So we focused on policymakers and senators and congressmen. And let me just tell you, because all friends are here and all good people and noble people are here, so I can share. In front of media, I get little because they manipulate things out of context. It was a deliberate decision. It was a very well thought out, very rational plan with an objective and a strategy. Our strategy was that we didn't want to start the screening in India. Because in India, if we had done that, everybody has skin in the game. It would have immediately converted into BJP versus Congress, Hindu versus Muslim, and tutu, meme, and media would have hijacked the whole thing, and they eventually did also, actually. But by the time, it was very late. It was very late by the time media and politicians jumped into it. Before that, we did 16 screenings in USA, mostly the diverse ethnicities, Blacks and Jews and Syrians and Yezdis and Baluchistani people, Sindhis, all kinds of persecuted people from the world who had zero idea about this. Zero. In fact, I can tell, not 100%, but a lot of people didn't even know anything about India. There was a Black woman who told me that before this, I just knew a little bit about India, that yes, it's a country, Modi rules it, but I had no clue what India is all about. I don't even know what language you guys speak. You know, but the language of pain is universal. It has universal resonance. You don't need words for it. So when we showed it over there, the message which went out, that we are united in telling this story to the world. 36 organizations, not a joke. And all educated, successful people work like volunteers. People can see this. So they saw we are united. Then those people must have sent WhatsApp messages back home. Then they also said, okay, we have to go to the mayor, bring him. And slowly there was kind of a competition that how many senators, congressmen you can impress upon. A lot of people saw it. We went to congressional reception at the Capitol. Guy gave lots of impact speeches in all universities. And we said that this debate, I actually had this conversation with Surendraji, and I said, Surendraji said that, listen, we should not sound as if we are against anyone. And I said, that's exactly what the film is about. And I must tell you, in the film, we have never, ever, not even once used the word Muslim to generalize. We have spoken only about terrorism, nothing else. The only time we have used the religious connection was when he talks about Iraqi and calls him Islamic tyrant, because that's what they were, Islamic tyrants. But for the contemporary politics, we have never used that word. Second thing is we did not use the word Pakistan. We have just shown Benazir's speech, but we have, as creators, we deliberately did not use that word. Our idea was to focus on terrorism. So when Surendraji talked about humanity, we said, yes, in America, we'll talk about humanity. And this film is basically about humanity because it shows you when humanity is attacked by terrorism, what happens. We wanted to show the real face of the enemy of humanity, which is terrorism. Now, this is a creator's choice. If you want to show today's Ram Navami, so I can say that we know the greatness of Rama lies in the power of Ravan. When you show how evil somebody can be, then only you understand how heroic it is to survive and to win the war. So therefore, it was very important to show the real face of terrorism, what it means to be inhuman. So we showed the face of inhumanity. It's like if you advise somebody how to live good life, people will listen and then they'll forget about it. But if you show them, you tell them about death, then suddenly they start taking good care of their own life. All of us have seen during COVID, how suddenly we became conscious of life because the death was looming. So when you show terrorism looming on your head, then you understand the value of humanity. And also you understand and you appreciate the struggle, survival, and success of this community. 100% educated ethnic community. And where is this wisdom coming from? So my deep research, I realized this is the DNA of Saraswati. So much of focus, not only on education, but to music, culture, values, food. Every single house I went to interview, even in Jammu, very lower middle class people also. They always serve, Rakeshji, correct me if I'm going wrong, they told me there should be 7 or 9 colors, on the table. So I think I have a feeling 9, that's what I remember. So they have so many dishes with different colors and aromas and all that. It very rarely happens, So I realized that very strong values of education and wisdom is coming. And that gave me a very strong sur, as we call it, to speak in America. And I spoke about Shiva and Saraswati. If you listen to all my speeches at Harvard Club and all the universities, I've spoken about the concept of oneness. The entire philosophy of Advaita and Shaivism, which is about oneness, that's what I spoke about. And people understood that we are not against anybody. We are only against terrorism, and we want justice to start with acknowledging that genocide took place. And I have to tell you, we were extremely successful in that. All the credit goes to all the volunteers, people, GKPD and all other organizations, Rakeshji, Surendraji, so many people, I can't even name them. And you will be delighted to know that all the supporters and fans and the audience, people who watch this movie in US, they contributed, donated money, and they put up a huge billboard at the Times Square on the 26th of January, the same place where Free Kashmir campaign billboards were put up, almost the same place. Where in the history of cinema something like this has happened? Never. Which means the film started working like a soft power in USA. And then came India. India, there was zero budget for marketing. Zero, when I say it means zero. I guarantee you have not seen one newspaper ad or one radio ad or TV ad or billboard or hoarding, nothing, absolutely nothing. So I love to walk and move on and just go from places to places, show it to 10 people, 15 people, 20 people, because I have great belief that if people connect with something, then they own the film. And we always said it's people's film because it's everybody's problem. Genocide is not just Kashmir's problem, it's India's problem. It's humanity's problem. It's everybody who breathes on this earth planet, it's his or her problem. So in India also, we did the same thing. We started showing it to people. And slowly, this great word of mouth started exchanging between India and the global audience. And in no time, within 2 days, Friday it released with 60 shows overseas. And in no time, within 2 or 3 days, it became almost 1,000. And that happened because the demand started coming from the countries where never ever a Hindi film released. Norway, Helsinki, Finland, Mozambique, these kind of places, Luxembourg, Estonia, there are only 250 Indians. And some 700-800 people saw the film within 2 days on the weekend, which means who was seeing it? If Indians had 200-250, even if they were doing repeat show next day, still there were 200-300 more counts than that. So slowly it started. By this time, everybody had underestimated us. The entire, there is one group which believes in humanity, which says justice should be done. The other group is which justifies terrorism. So the other group which justifies terrorism had actually underestimated. Thank God they did it. So first few days, 7, 8, 10 days, they did not even bother. They thought, okay, maybe it's a phenomenon, it will die. But then they realized that everybody is talking about it. All the stars in Bollywood, they didn't care about the film, but when they were going to promote their own film, media was asking them about the Kashmir Files. So people had to take notice. And this happened because people owned the film. And people owned the film doesn't mean it's a physical object that people went and owned it. People owned an idea. And the idea here was that terrorism is the biggest enemy of humanity. And I must give credit, forget media right now, because what media says is something else. But the common people were talking about the film, they were talking about empathy, they were crying. This became the first film which was seen in pin drop silence all over the world. Today I was sitting with somebody who came from San Francisco, and he was saying, this is the first film I have ever seen. For 3 hours, people watched it in pin drop silence, which means people give it due respect. People became part of that sorrow. People connected with that sorrow. And that's why I always keep writing that this film is uniting Indians. And when I say Indians, so many Buddhists, so many Christians, and thousands of Sikhs, they write to me, they meet me, and they tell me, we never felt so united as we do now. So sometimes people get united in pain. So the second conclusion is, Rakesh ji, that the film has worked as soft power. Where we take it from here is another discussion. And last, I would say, I'll divide it into 2 parts, A and B. So A is that it has demolished, if not demolished, it's a very harsh word, I should not use it. It has shown to the world, to India especially, that yes, films can be made without Bollywood mindset. Bollywood is a mindset. It's not an office where you go 9 to 5. It's a mindset. And the mindset is that audience is not intelligent. That's it. Everything else people say is gossip, nepotism, and this, and Khanwood and Dawood. That's all, most of it is gossip. The truth is that I worked here, right from studios to producers to even the spot boy will tell you, make it as dumb as possible because rickshawala will not understand. This is one example which is given from the most intellectual poet, communist leader of Bollywood to a very cool producer, director of Bollywood. Everybody. We made it with a written objective that audience is more intelligent than us. People are saying, they are discussing politics in a room, 5 intellectuals are discussing politics, and the JNU politics, Pallavi is talking about Lalita Aditya. Who cares about these things? So many names, the hero, in the end, when he puts out the list of the great people who are from Kashmir, people said, no, people will lose interest here. But I said, no, audience is intelligent. They want to know what is not being told to them. And the native intelligence, I trust native intelligence more than academic intelligence. Sorry, a lot of academicians, sorry, Makranji, please excuse me, pardon me. But that's what I believe, And that's exactly what happened. It opened up new market. The regular Bollywooders, people who see Bollywood first day, first show, they didn't go to see this film. The people who were seeing this film came from a different world, which means the market is so big, Bollywood has failed to even exploit and actualize that market. So the lower class people, the rickshawala, has understood this film better than lots of people who are still seeking nuances in the film. My logic about nuances is, film is very nuanced. If you see all the names and the way Krishna and Arjun, all those things, Makranji has written a lot about the art of it. But it's a very nuanced film. When it comes to other characters, the food they eat, there are a lot of nuance. Then in the food we show, she says, "Agar tum Nadru nahi jante ho, to Kashmir bhi nahi jaan sakte." All these are very nuanced dialogues. You know, Mitunda says, "Toote hue log bolte nahi unhe suna." These are very nuanced dialogue. There are movements in that. But the problem is, the dominating part is terrorism. And how can terrorism have nuance? You have written that story of terrorism. If you have not left any nuance in that, how can I bring nuance in it? That would be fake. There is no nuance in terrorism. So therefore, there is no nuance in your story. Now, why do you expect me to just, beautify it and put some nuance in your story? And there is a nuance, If you see when this Bitta comes to meet Krishna in the boat, in the Shikara, there's a little child, and he says, say hello to him. He speaks to him in English. And that's exactly what's happening in Kashmir. All these people who are talking about, rigid Islamic laws, their children are going to Europe to study, and they talk to their children in English. Their children wear jeans and everything. They are not wearing kurta pajama. So there's a very nuanced symbolism over there. But then the people don't understand. But this thing, a lower middle class, a villager understood better than anyone else. So it's a very important part that now so many filmmakers will touch upon many harsh truths without caring about Bollywood or the box office, because they know people are ready to listen. And the B part is something which is very, very close to my heart, and that is about Indic Renaissance. And this film, I think, somewhere can help. I don't know where it will go, but the kind of confidence it has given to young people might be a start. Because if you see all the creative people, they have made art, music, literature, poetry around it. They have not gone into bashing anybody or criticizing anybody or abusing anybody, which is a great victory. And this has also given hope that outside politics, a lot of things can be done. The reason so many of us are sitting here listening patiently to my extended observations, it is a proof itself that we are wanting to do something. And now it is very important for cultural or intellectual leaders from our group, people like Subhash ji, Rakesh ji, Makran ji, Pinky ji, Lakshmi ji, and everybody present over here, for us to use this energy and convert it into bringing about Indic Renaissance. We need it. Yesterday, I was in Thailand, so they took me to their #1 university, and they made me pose exactly at the same place where Gurudev Rabindranath Tagore stood, to pose exactly there, and then to another place where Subhash Chandra Bose also posed at that time. Now, if you look at that period was really full of Indic Renaissance. It was, look at the kind of writers, poets, authors, thinkers, social activists, politicians for that matter. Gandhi was also almost the same time. So Ambedkar, I mean, you plethora of thinkers and writers, and that's what gave us freedom from the colonials. But right now, it is very important for us to give us freedom from terrorism, from forces which are fragmenting us. It's very important for us to be united. It is time to succeed. And this can happen if we help empower a lot of young people. Vivek Agnihotri said, give me 100 people, that famous quote, and I will transform this country or society. I don't know. I have a feeling he never found 100 people. Makranji knows, I don't know. But I believe maybe he found 99. I am the 100th one. I am also one of them. So that's why I'm non-stop working on this. This Kashmiri Hindu issue, this genocide issue, we requested MP government, they have allotted a land on which I said, let's create a genocide museum. Actually, it is a humanity museum, but it shows to people what happens in the absence of humanity. That's my objective. I have nothing to do with it. I have just, because I could do it, that's why I did it. I asked him, but very soon I'm going to leave it to people, great people, a lot, some people who are sitting here also, some who are not here. And then it's very important we create that museum as an example. Besides that, I'm also empowering a lot of young boys and girls. I have associated with Makhanlal Chaturvedi University. If somebody wants us to be associated with any other educational institution, we are willing to put some scholarships to start with on Kashmir culture, politics, art, literature, those kind of things. If somebody wants to create music, I'm willing to sponsor them. Somebody wants to do some research work, we are willing to sponsor them. Somebody wants to make movies, I want to sponsor them. We are doing it because we think the people have given us so much of love and support. And it is like the film belongs to them. Everything which comes out of this film, even the little power to negotiate with politicians, I must use it to better cause. This is not just one story of genocide. We have many stories like this. I'm sure some young people will get inspired and they'll also make stories, bring them out. So this is golden period. In the end, I just want to read out one thing. Some of you may have seen it. The biggest success of this has never happened in India before, anything like this. I don't know much about what happened after Schindler's List, but I can tell you in India, nothing like this happened. I received this message after one screening somewhere, and I'll read it out to you. This is from Girja Tikku's sister. And I'll read exactly the way she sent me a direct message, and with her permission, I posted it and I'm reading it before I end. She writes, watched your movie today. My late sister Girja Tikku was a brave girl, and we never discussed or even talked about her at home. Whole family was going through depression and guilt of not being able to do anything for her. Now you showed her sacrifice in your movie. Now, for the first time, we have started talking about her within family. Your movie is starting healing process within traumatized families. And this is not just the one. There are hundreds of people who are saying our healing has begun. And let's not make the mistake of thinking this is the healing of only Kashmiri Hindus. I think this is the healing of Bharat collectively. And that's why everybody has owned this cause. And we are lucky to be born in the time when we have seen this magic, that when people come together with honest and sincere empathy, then they are capable of changing the world. Thank you very much.
Rakeshji, may I make a brief comment?
Yes, I propose in the interest of time, Makranji, why don't you make a brief comment, and I'll ask the panelists, Pinky, General Ata Hasnain, and then Subhash, to just briefly speak for a minute on what you heard from Vivekji's speech. I will then end it with 30 seconds. Go ahead, Makranji. Let's do the closing round.
Thank you. We are completely short of time. We're out of time, but we want to congratulate you, Vivekji. As you rightly said, this film is very important, and the film has an afterlife. It's not just a film. You know, it's a movement to galvanize a cultural renaissance, as you said. And I completely agree that it seems to be about Kashmir, but this is actually a film about India. That's the first thing you said, that it creates unity. It's also a film which shows a progression from fear to courage to hope. We talked about that yesterday, but today in your own, I think, speech, it's come out really, really clearly. And I must also say that the film, you know, is triggering in us a deep introspection about who we are, you know, and where we want to go from here. And it's also a sign of the times that young people want to unleash their creativity and contribute, not just to India, but to humanity. You know, the film is also deeply humanitarian. So with these words, I have much to say, but I will defer it for another time, because the discussion around the film will go on, I believe. It's triggered a tsunami, an emotional tsunami, as well as you said, it broke the Bollywood formula. And I just want to say one thing, because we talk so much about the aesthetics of the film and about Indian aesthetics. The highlight, according to Indian aesthetic and poetic theories, of any great work of art is what is called chamatkar. Okay. Now, you can't translate that word. It's not just a miracle. It's not karamat. It's something extraordinary. It's like a sphota. It's like an explosion of energy, which eventually leads to ananda. Now, the reason I'm bringing this up is that the entire creation of this film, from its conception to the shooting, to the distribution, to its box office success, to its afterlife, it illustrates this chamatkar. There is, it's something quite miraculous. It's unprecedented. And we are all a part of this celebration. We are happy to join it, because talking about Tagore, Tagore said that this life which has been given to us is an ananda yagya. It's a sacrifice of happiness. I mean, it's a joyous sacrifice. And what our culture tells us is everybody is invited, nobody is excluded. With those words, thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you, Makranti. I will now ask Pinky to give her closing comments. Pinky, please unmute yourself and give your closing comments, please.
I'm flawed. I think the movie, as well as Vivek, has touched the human chord, which few of us can do, but having done so well, let's take this journey forward. And I think you've translated it into another level altogether. And one comment that I want to make, which you didn't touch upon, is the last speech not only identified the great people from and thinkers, intellectuals, etc. from India, but the fact that the speech was supposed to be a political speech. The guy was contesting for elections. However, he touched civilization and humanity and was able to carry that forward into a motion. What happened to the elections, we don't mind. That's not important. But the fact is, he actually used that to address it on a non-political, intellectual, human rights issue, which I think was delightful. Thank you.
I will ask General Ata Hasnain for his closing comments.
Thank you, and Jai Hind to you, Vivek Sahab. It was a delight, absolutely, listening to this excellent commentary which you gave. I have been very deeply involved myself with Jammu and Kashmir. I'm not sure whether you're aware of it, but I've been there for many, many years and carry lots and lots of memories of that place. What I would request you to do from this brilliant film is, first of all, to make sure that it is put up on OTT. And so that people in Kashmir can see it. You see, we are seeing it in Bharat. It's a film of Bharat. We have to tell people in Kashmir that they are part of Bharat, and that we should not be uncomfortable about our conversations on this issue. The day we can converse comfortably on a platform between different communities of Jammu and Kashmir will be the day that I would say your film has won. It has won absolutely, right? Because at the end of the day, the purpose of this film is to find peace, right? The purpose is to find peace. We have tried all kinds of methods to find peace. We have not succeeded fully yet. We have a reasonably artificial peace at the moment. There is still a simmering which is going on down below. We would like to put an end to this. Maybe it may happen over a couple of generations, but the beginning of this has to happen now. I think the most outstanding achievement of your film is that it is actually making that beginning. And I think the greatest courage would be, I would love to go with you. I would love to be on the same platform with you. You and I can speak together in Jammu and Kashmir. Let's go there and speak about this film. That will show our ultimate courage. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Subhash, Professor Subhash, your closing comments?
Thank you, Vivekji. What a brilliant speech, truly outstanding. Now, my big takeaway from this is when you spoke about the panwala offering free pans, or the istri wala doing free istri, because what this movie is actually about is a true freedom of India. You know, after what happened in 1947, it were the elites who decided how India was to be run, and what stories were to be told and what stories were to be hidden for certain, harmony in society, whatever values, whatever objectives they had. But ultimately, I think the greatest takeaway is truth to power. Ultimately, to solve problems, we have to speak honestly. We want to bring in all communities. Everybody who lives in India is an Indian, is a Bharatiya. We have to bring them together. We have to embrace all of them. But people would be emboldened to make that embrace if they have been told the truth. And I think where our policymakers and politicians and our intellectuals and people in Bollywood had made a mistake, I'm sure in their heart also they want the good for the country. Where they made the mistake was to think that perhaps these things are too inconvenient. They need to be hidden away. I think that's the greatest mistake we have made. We must speak truth to power, speak honestly and respectfully. It's not that, okay, if somebody has made a mistake now, we're going to tread them or trot them under our feet. No, we have to embrace people, but speak to them respectfully, but speak the truth. Truth is the only thing that can free us. And that's what, India is unstoppable economically, worldwide. And in order to complement that strength, we have to embrace these stronger principles. And I think that's where Kashmir Files is going to be a, unprecedented movement. Thank you again, Vivekji.
I will now give my closing comments. First, I want to express my deep appreciation to Makaranji, who, as I said, was the preceptor. He and I worked together to bring the symposia, make it happen. To all the speakers, each one of you profoundly wise and thought leaders, you came and you contributed. I speak from my heart to Vivekji. When you came with Palviji and graced our home and spent time with us, not only was there trust, not only was there intuitive connectivity, but I could see that you were seeking direct experience of a tragedy that every Kashmiri Pandit had buried in a spot where even they would not be able to find it. And so you were the seeker supreme that got every Kashmiri Pandit to open up, retrieve back that immense pain, that immense sorrow. And I can't tell you what gratitude the Kashmiri Pandit community feels towards you or what it owes towards you. But I do want to make one comment on your idea of Indian Renaissance. I will say to you, Vivekji, that you have already accomplished the first and most important aspect of any culture. And that is storytelling. It is in Kashmir that goes the honor of being a claimant for birthing storytelling that shapes people, hearts, and minds. Pandit Vishnu Sharma, who wrote the Panchtantra, which is still today the most translated story out of India in the world, salutes. Pandit Somadeva, who wrote Katha Sarit Sagar from Kashmir, salutes. These stories, Panchtantra and Katha Sarat Sagar, traveled all over the world. They found their way into Chaucer, Fontaine, Hansel and Gretel, Aesop's fables. These stories shape the stories of humanity. And my prediction is, Vivek ji, that the Kashmir Files that you and Pallavi ji created will become a case study wherever there is suffering, wherever there is pain around the world, whichever part of humanity suffers, and people want to tell their story, they will watch the story out of India, out of Bharat, to understand how they should tell their story. And for that, we are very grateful that you have given a toolkit to fight back against stereotypes. I salute. This movement will move forward. We gather adherents each day. You are the avatar. You are the avatar of the new Bharat. And this movement will gain in steam. Today, Pinky ji said publicly, she will support us in our fight in Parliament, in our fight for justice against our tormentors. I couldn't ask more out of these 2 days. We will post these videos on YouTube. We will post these videos on social media. I will say this to everyone. Go back and listen to Vivek Agnihotri's talk today. It was profound. It has unlocked the creative energy of mighty India. And with that, I thank you.
Namaste. We hope you enjoyed this Chitti Media content. Please remember to subscribe to us and switch on the notifications for this channel. For our other social media links, more content, and to support our work, please visit citti.net. Dhanyavad. Namaskar.